Welcome to the GovComms podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to GovComms, the podcast that examines the practice of content communication in government and the public sector. My name's David Pembroke, and joining me today is a very special guest, not quite into the GovComms space, as many of us are, but someone who will bring real insight and wisdom about the practice of content communication and how, in fact, we can use it in government in order to achieve the objectives of the elected governments of the day who we work with. His name is Todd Wheatland, and I'll just tell you a bit of a story. A number of years ago, I was at Content Marketing World. I think it was the second Content Marketing World in Cleveland. Anyway, it was a morning session. I remember it clearly. And here was this sort of young, good-looking, I couldn't quite work out whether he was Australian or he wasn't Australian. But anyway, he told this very compelling story. It was a great content story, but it was a fable of some sort. I can't quite remember what it was now. But I remember thinking, great presentation, beautifully put together, compelling, room full of people, and he really landed it. And I thought, oh, maybe he is an Australian guy after all. And that's as it happened to be. He exactly was. But at the time, he was running content marketing for Kelly Services, and he was running it out of Paris, and it was a global organisation, and he was doing big things. Anyway, he's gone on to become one of the superstars, one of the pantheon of heroes, the A-listers in the content marketing world. You know, he's written a book with Joe Chernov on SlideShare. He's renowned for his presentations. People just go to have a look at his decks because he does them so beautifully. He is a keynote speaker pretty much everywhere around the world in content marketing, particularly at Content Marketing World. And guess what? He joins me in the studio here in Canberra. I'm so delighted that he's here. Todd Wheatland, thanks very much for joining us on GovComms.
Best intro ever. Thank you, Dave.
So listen, let's go back. What is your journey into content? What was it? You know, is it a fairly typical sort of a pathway that many people take, either through marketing or through journalism, or just what is the Todd Wheatland story?
Yes, well, I wasn't predicting that one, but let me lead with it. I was always into writing.
Yep.
Loved my writing as a kid. Won a few Young Writer Awards sort of things. Wrote a bit for the Monthly, if you remember that magazine.
Yes, I do remember the Monthly.
The Independent Monthly.
Oh, the Independent Monthly, yes.
So I did a bit with them in my youth, and then moved overseas for a while on exchange. Came back, did commerce, hated it, but I passed. Ended up working with the Australian government overseas for a while. Came back, started working, and then was really just burnt out already. You know, at a very young age at the traditional corporate sort of role. Went back to uni.
And was that a marketing role?
It was a marketing role,
okay,
back in Australia. Mm-hmm. So I worked for the Australian government in Spain for a couple of years in 92. And then I came back and, I guess was a bit sort of socialist of mind and a bit disturbed by capitalism at the time. Went back, so studied communications. Yep. So went back to uni, did comms degree, came back out and started making documentaries with the ABC. And then realised that you can't make money making documentaries for anyone and sold my soul and started working in marketing proper.
Yep.
Moved around a bit, ended up with Kelly in Paris, as you know, for 8 years. Okay. And during that time, that's when it really, I guess, started to... I saw a lot of, a lot of the storytelling sort of, we love that word, right? But a lot of that the desire to look behind the scenes to really find some authenticity, to find a bit of a hook in there, and what does it actually mean to connect with an energy? And I think a lot of that, desire to, I'm really into photography, I'm really into docos, I'm really into writing. That sort of stuff is, I found a place for that sort of creativity in a corporate guise, and that for me was the joy of what we now call content marketing when it really started taking off, say 10 years ago.
Okay, so Kelly's, I reckon, particularly for government comms audience, because Kelly is a vast multinational organisation in the recruitment and services businesses largely. I think it's Michigan based, isn't it? I think that's where it comes from.
It is, yep.
Anyway, but it's big, it's old, it moves slowly, so it's got a lot of characteristics the same as government. How were you able to get people to understand that content could be used to solve business problems? Because at the end of the day, that's what leadership cares about. They care about solving problems. How did you do that?
I think I was faced with a particular reality at Kelly, right? So Kelly was all those things you just mentioned, a bit of a not in the most glamorous high margin business in terms of where it was really strong and large, and it's a difficult thing to think. In fact, I've been having this conversation today with someone. If you look at the totality of a situation, sometimes it's so overwhelming you just can't think of where, everything you think of doing seems like, it's not going to be possible because of X, Y, Z. So there's a lot of reasons why something will never work.
And there's a lot of people who'll tell you a lot of reasons why it won't work, or we've done it before and it didn't work.
And the legacy in those big companies and the history of how many people have been there a long time, etc. Of course, right? So I think the window of opportunity that opened for us was we were launching a new consulting division. And that was like a spin-off. So it was like,
pilot.
Exactly. So the more, and this has been, I guess, my approach whenever I've worked with organisations around, and I'm sure it's yours too, whenever you work with organisations around anything that smells like change management or doing something different or something that's going to threaten someone's turf, it's how can you bring people, how can you reduce the resistance or the hackles or the threats to someone's turf by helping position as a pilot, as something, well, we're not going to treat this in the same way as everything else. Don't everyone get excited about this. We're just going to do this as a pilot. And that word actually, I think, has a certain salve value to it that allows you to get your elbows out and sort of try something a bit different without going through the same process.
It was funny though. I had a funny line from someone the other day who's, obviously everyone's onto this, this trick about, no, it's just a pilot. And someone said to me the other day that in their particular government departments, they had more pilots than Qantas. It's not a bad line, is it?
It's nice.
Everyone's like, no, it's just a pilot. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Just let us get back. So, but then, okay, so we get the pilots. How did you make it work in a big organisation? Again, a siloed organisation, people thinking, this isn't going to work. This is just a folly.
The key thing to any, again, change management or something you want to do is executive buy-in, right? So it's getting that sponsor. In this case, it was the CEO. Of the organisation who went, okay, I'm going to give you the latitude to go off brand, to go outside the normal channels. And in this particular case, we were the mothership brand had certain characteristics of positioning, and the brand we were trying to create was really going up head to head against McKinsey's, against big consulting firms. And we didn't have anything like the budget. I mean, the example I would love to use would be, Isentia at the time spending $20 million a year on Tiger Woods, just for him plus media, right? So, and I think our operating marketing budget for the first year was probably $200,000.
Yeah.
And so the realities of trying to tell any sort of story in a traditional marketing way. You were going to get burnt. You're just going to throw your money out straight away.
Yeah.
So we were sort of forced to it in a way. Retrospectively, you sort of go, well, what options did you have? You either did a whole bunch of things in a tiny way that weren't going to have any impact at all, or you could leverage the one thing we actually did have, which was smart people. We had really, really smart people within the business, and if we could get their knowledge out of them and share it with the world, we would totally transform the way people thought about our organisation. And so that was the key, unlocking that little insight and finding the pathway to actually executing on that and getting that story out there. That's where everything started to happen. And,
okay. So tell me a story. Tell me a story about a success of where you were able to do that and how you were able to do that well.
Okay.
And how you solved a business problem, because that's what I'm interested in. That's what I'm obsessed about, is that how do we use this stuff to actually do stuff that people care about? So
I will tell you a story, because we are storytellers, Dave. I'll tell you a story about, and this is a multifaceted story. This is a story about.
We've got plenty of time. Don't worry, it's my podcast. I can do what I like.
I will. You're going to edit me out altogether.
No.
I won't even be in this podcast. It'll just be a monologue. We've got.
I do those, but not today.
We had a series of ebooks that I did with a particular CEO of a division of one of our businesses.
And what were they about?
Leadership.
Right.
Very.
That doesn't sound very niche. That sounds like I can read that anyway.
Exactly. So, and this shows you the power of. This tells you the power of publishing, and the limitations of attribution, which isn't. In fact, neither of those what you asked me about. But I'm going to tell you this bloody story now. I've started. Good. Because whilst it seemingly was quite, and I had a lot of resistance to actually doing this, and let's call it a vanity project. This was a vanity project for a particular senior leader,
okay,
which previously would have just been, in a previous environment would have just been like, okay, let's just get that done and get it out with.
Yeah.
But instead, we approached this in a new way. We thought, okay, how can we? There's multiple parts to this story. How can we invest time in really packaging this up in a beautiful format? How can we blend it with some research, and how can we put an organic, at that time, organic was a very different thing to achieve than it is now.
Yeah.
How can we promote this in a way that's going to get it in front of the right people, and so extend this is just me spouting about leadership because I'm a leader, and actually turn it into something that can actually drive an opportunity for the business. Now, we would do all the wonderful, analytics that we still do, which is around, views, downloads, blah, 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 page views, downloads, attributions, all this stuff. This we published on SlideShare, which was a big platform at the time. And one of these ebooks, we subsequently found out, was downloaded by a business journo in Bulgaria, who translated it fully. And we only found out about this because he embedded the original SlideShare player in his website. So we managed to identify that he'd actually done this. That presentation was subsequently used by a senior oil and gas executive at a conference in Norway. And he quoted my then boss at the time on that document. On that presentation. That then ended up being discussed at an internal company meeting in Canada, and 6 months later we signed a deal with that company in Texas. Okay, now fantastic, was a massive deal, massive hit. We only found out about that 6 months after the fact, by accident, just through a casual conversation when we were talking to someone from this company. Right? So we had no idea the limitations of attribution, and we've been so careful to measure every single bit of the impact that this thing was having. Right? We were measuring our tweets and our little LinkedIn likes and all this crap, which had which no one really cares about within the business because but it's the only thing you could tell really about the impact. Whereas the real story was something much larger.
How were you able to track it back? How are you able to sort of go back through the
we knew the Bulgarian thing had happened.
You knew that.
We knew the Bulgarian thing had happened. We knew because we could see that the player had been embedded on this page. We backtracked all of the rest through the client. Right. Who said it was, was this meeting in Alaska? Okay, that's because Pete went to this conference in Norway and he saw this guy presenting about whatever.
So the client told you the
reveal.
Nice.
But so fantastic story, but to me it really highlights one of the severe limitations of all. You can put all this effort into anything you want, right? But the true impact of a lot of what you're doing will never get measured, and you'll never be aware of what's actually going on. But the impact is there.
So that raises a couple of things. Well, actually, let's stay on that example for a moment because I love that play or the tactic of interesting content times media equals exposure. So it's a play that we often use is, let's create something that we think's got some interest, that's got some value, pitch it to the media, get it out, get it moving. So we're away from our own platforms, but we then set it free. Do you like that play?
Do I like the play?
Do you like creating content and then using the media to try to get that distribution happening, to get the movement happening?
I'll go back a little bit. I don't think the play's changed at all. Right, since the late, so the late 90s, I became a huge fan of research and creating original, quarterly indexes, annual indexes, And, again, it was what we would call now a pure content marketing play.
Yep.
But before we called it content marketing, then we would call it, it was basically a PR push, right? Because we would say, okay, this is a story, and we want to get this out. We want to get this in, we want to go mainstream with this particular story in this particular niche, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it was what shocks me about the whole thing, because on a day-to-day or a month-by-month basis, everything seems to be moving so quickly, and this is also different and also new, and it feels like it's fundamentally changed. But absolutely, what is so shocking is the core of what we are doing is absolutely true to the way it's always been. And I think that this dynamic between what do we know and what do we believe. What do the people we're trying to influence know, and what do they believe, and how we can influence that mechanism of changing their behaviour or changing their mindset. Mm-hmm. The channels to do so, we'll have different tactics and execution layers that'll wither and die over time. However, the fundamental mechanism of this is, we create an asset, we create a mechanism through which to influence their decision, and getting in front of the media, whether that's our own or an external one, is the fundamental way to achieve that. So I'm totally passionate about the model.
And what about attribution? What about this notion of, I can't put my hand on my heart to be able to say actually what that impact is, because I simply don't know. How do you overcome that problem where people say, I want to know what the return on investment is, and I want it in a little box about this big, and I want it by 9 o'clock on Monday, and I want it with a degree of certainty of 90% or something like that? It's simply not possible. Is that your view?
I think it's no. Look, the way I talk about this this challenge is, Newtonian physics works until it doesn't. Right. It's like we're trying to describe the world using Newtonian physics. So for the vast majority of what we're trying to do, it gives you a pretty strong correlation, association with what you're trying to describe. But it's far from the whole story, and we don't even know what the whole story is. Much like trying to blend these different versions of it's like a square trying to measure a circle, right? Mm-hmm. We're getting closer and closer and closer to the truth, but we're never. I don't think we're ever going to get there, and of course we can't until we map all of our brains into one connected system. So I think. I was working in Isentia. I understand the model. I understand the value, and it's a highly valuable understanding the way a story flows and creates. And it's another reason why I love research, especially replicable research, because if you're coming back every month, quarter, year, then you can do a lot of experimentation with what levers to pull to get the story out, to get the media's liking, that's actually having impact with the end user, the end client. But I guess my tendency is to over measure. So a lot of people say just get the core metrics you want to measure and stuff. My tendency is measure everything, because you never know at what point you're going to want to dive back into that, and especially in this era of people actually finally making sense of how to use data, then I think that's going to become increasingly valuable to be able to go back and look at things in ways that we haven't done before to actually try to ascertain.
So then, understanding that, and probably going back to that essence around you were talking before, that the basic principles of this is what we know and believe, and we want to transmit what we know and believe in order to drive attitude, behaviour, whatever it is. Particularly in government, it is often about behaviour change, the way that we go about things. But would you agree that it really has to start from that purest point, that often you're just not going to know what's going to move the needle. Often, context influences things, or maybe what you're saying is not right for the right time, but where you are on your safest ground is where you are working on what you know and understand, and being consistent over time about what it is that you need to communicate specifically to the audience that you're seeking to engage with, and really just go from there. Start with that, and then hopefully the metrics will give you some encouragement on the way to help you to learn and understand what the audience is looking for. But if you start from that position of, this is what I want people to know and understand, that you're really not going to go too far wrong, because you're coming from that place of, emotion and passion and truth.
Yeah, a really well phrased question. I think I see it as there's a continuum between us and our audiences, right? There's and most people, the tendency, I think, especially for larger organisations, is to really spend a lot of time focusing on the audience. Which totally valid and a very important thing to do. It's difficult for an organisation to have that same level of focus on themselves, and as a result, it's difficult for an organisation to understand how to be authentic, how to be transparent, how to portray itself in a way that can potentially be engaged with, or get a warmer engagement level or association with from an organisation, from an audience perspective. So I think trying to apply those metrics about what's working with the audience is absolutely that's fundamental, right? Because you understand is what I'm doing working? Is it getting anywhere? Blah blah blah. And there's many ways, both online and offline, you can try to do that. I do like what's possible now with trying to track the origin and the impact of a story and across channels. That's a really interesting dynamic that's only really come possible in the last couple of years, I think, in the depth we're getting now. But just as you said, being true to yourself, because ultimately it's backing yourself and understanding what is it we mean to this audience, what is it where what's the role, what is the message we're trying to get through that will hopefully sway them, and is applying the consistency there. And that's the thing that people. Especially, I think, probably more in the corporate sector than in the public sector, people drift away from this consistency of messaging, right? And they think, oh well, no, we've got to get more engagement in our social media feeds. Therefore, they start to wander away from this thing of consistency, because they're rewarding the person who's running their social media feeds for engagement, and to get more engagement, then you got to get more outrageous or more banal, or more pictures please, or funny gifs, because you're chasing this sort of these metrics that you're being rewarded for. So the consistency of actually being true and actually having a strategy around that's enunciated and documented, and everyone who's in that mix, who's in this communications roles, is clear about this is what we are and what we represent, and this is why this is meaningful for our audience. That's the work that needs, and you know this more than I do.
Well, but it's patience, and often patience is difficult. The quarterly numbers, the pressure, the minister's office calling. What's happening? Are we moving something? And it is hard for people to say, I think we're right, can we hold firm? Because it's going to take a little bit more time, because in this crazy, fractured, busy world, trying to earn a share of someone's time and attention is becoming harder and harder and harder and harder.
Yep.
Like everyone's in this game now.
And even the media intensity. I heard an interview the other day, just a few days ago, about, and I'm going to get the program name wrong, but this medical records database.
My Health Record.
My Health Record.
Yep.
I heard an interviewer on the radio just hammering whoever was responsible for rolling out the actual promotion of this, or the opportunity to opt out, and really hammering the decision to spend the advertising money on, or the promotion money on, the medical profession, rather than just on billboard, sides of buses, TV, radio ads, right? So even even you got the media questioning aggressively, challenging the marketing approach of a government organisation who's out there just trying to get the word out to let people know. It's not like they weren't spending the money they had earmarked; they were just questioning what's their marketing mix essentially in public. So, I think I feel for people who are trying to get that done, because the questions aren't just coming from within; they're coming. There's very public scrutiny from everywhere.
It's a big part of public sector communication, and really, it is public money. And I think you've got to put on a bit of a Teflon suit when you do work in this part, because often it is hard to keep people happy. But listen, how about...
But also, Dave, that's not waiting 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the track to see what the impact of what you did happen. No. That's the week you're launching, right?
Well, someone's got, but and the way these things generally works is, out it comes, the flamethrowers come out, the minister's office jumps, what's going on? They go troppo, and then all of a sudden everyone runs around in ever-decreasing circles trying to put the fire out and thinking, by the time they sit down, it's, anyway, that's quite an actually interesting case study around content, and we can come to that to another time. But take me into where you see things going over the next, 3 to 5 years, because my sense of it is, and the point you raised there before is that the basics are the basics of the basics, and they're not going to change. And I think a lot of the perhaps innovation has started to slow a little. And yes, technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of that's coming, but the basic principles aren't changing, are they? And it's about just getting better at it and understanding these things, like the basic principle of consistency. I think I've learnt that over the last little while. Let's just be consistent. Let's just do that, And if we do that, that'll work well now, but it'll also work well in 5 years' time. So what's your view on how things are changing? And I suppose I asked that question in the context that the annual jamboree of the content marketing world is gathering in September in Cleveland, where the world comes together to discuss what's new, what's great, what's working. So what's your view on what will be discussed in Cleveland?
Look, and I don't know whether it's also a thing of age, Dave, where you've seen a few cycles, right? And you start to go, well, your focus becomes, you become less and less distracted by those temporal tactics, if you like, and you start to see these truisms that have stayed constant through that time. Yeah. And I think you've also observed you observe your own behaviour as a consumer, as a voter, as a member of the community. You kind of want to have a touchstone sort of value. What is that wall? What does Dave stand for? What does this thing represent? So that consistency thing, in terms of how it plays out, I think there is a maturity that's happened in social media, for example. Social media is 20 years old. 15 years old at most for, say, LinkedIn. It's 10 years old essentially for the core the core era we know now. So I think there's been this many cycles of that growth or the penetration or the change of what social media means, but I think there's also been a maturity or an acceptance within organisations that social media. Yes, it can wander off brand, and yes, it can, especially in some types of organisations, the tolerance allows some industries, the tolerance, especially for targeting millennials, is quite high outside of brand. But there's also a recognition that that commitment to a consistent position has to flow through all these channels, right? It's not like, well, the social guys are off doing that. Who knows what the hell they're up to? But they're getting crazy likes, and that's awesome, right? That's gone viral. Remember that term? Thankfully, no one talks about that so much anymore. But it's there's still there's a recognition. I hope that it's just as important to be true to who you are, and that message is. Plays out well with an audience who, it may not be that they're touching, hearing from you in, every month, but that one touch once a year, okay, 3 times this month, but not again for 2 years. That they understand what it is they're going to get when they get there, and that's I think that so there's a very long way of saying, I hear what you say about these meta trends or these long-term things which are about storytelling. I hate saying the word. I feel bad. I'm trying to resist saying it. Finding a way to communicate with your audience in ways that treats them like individuals, and not like part of the masses. And so this, the 20 years ago, we used to talk about, the vision of one-to-one marketing, right? It used to be a DM, a direct mail sort of catch cry about how can you get this targeted database-driven sort of framework to deliver a customized message to an individual, and ultimately that's the way we've headed down with websites, with apps now. You know, we in my world where I'm working with organisations and we're deploying a lot of custom type, you know, websites that are really doing things that we always wish we could do, you know, even a few years ago that we couldn't, and now that's becoming relatively mainstream in terms of the way you really can be speaking to someone. It's not even from an exploitative sense. It's giving them. It's really giving them something that is what they want. And to me, this whole concept of content marketing, at its purest, is about delivering something that is of high value to someone without the direct expectation of a financial or other return in the immediate term.
Yes.
And that's that's the consistency, right? If you can deliver that consistency and build this tolerance where we understand who you are, then within a certain framework, then you can actually ask. You have a great degree of latitude.
There's
to
notion
do more.
of giving before you get, being in service, and it's true. It works. And it's a nice way to go about your business as well. Is to really think about your audience and really try to deliver value for them. And if something comes off the back of that, well, that's great.
Yep.
You know, if something doesn't happen, that's fine.
Now to your, and I haven't. So I'll jump back to your point, which I totally failed to answer. But let me summarise it quickly. I do feel yes. I've always been a fan of data.
Yep.
I do feel that we are seeing things with machine learning that are really interesting, and will have a far greater impact. It's going to take much longer than the drum beaters would have us think, but I think already the types of things even on projects I'm directly related with, doing things that I would have even dreamed of a couple of years ago, and that I can only imagine when true AI kicks in, then that's going to be a big part of it. Now, that's not necessarily the content marketing world we've come from, but in terms of the overall mission of it's built on audience understanding, and it's taking assets and packaging them in ways that are delivering ever increasing value to that audience, then actually it is still very fundamental to the mission that content marketing is. It's just maybe taking people out of the role in a different way.
Yeah. Now, just before we go, because we've got a couple of minutes left, but I did mention Content Marketing World, and I love the Content Marketing World. Always have. Was lucky enough to go to the first one, and I wasn't able to go last year, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to go this year for a number of reasons. But what I do like to do every year for my audience is to encourage them to go, is to just go. Get yourself sorted out, get over there, dive in, and have a great time. Because not only is Cleveland a great city, it's full of wonderful people, but the world gathers in a genuine way. So give me your pitch for why people should get themselves over there and get learning and get involved in Content Marketing World, because it starts, I think, September 4th.
Yep,
so it's early September, so we've still got plenty of time to do your planning. But why should people be going?
Look, much like you, Dave, I've been to all of them except one. And I've spoken at all of them that I've been at. To me, it's the single event that I try to get to each year. It is, and so why would that be? Obviously, it's the intersection of journalism, of marketing, of filmmaking, of technology, of AI, of what have you. It really is where this fabric connects in a way that. And it's of the scale now where you have you have a lot of people from myriad industries there, and for me that's the stimulating thing. So no, it's not just a straight public sector event, right? But in fact, for innovation, for leveraging for stimulating your mind creatively in ways that you cannot predict. The sheer expanse of sessions that are available. There's a huge number of concurrent sessions that are available. where you can really curate your own experience around, exposing yourself to a huge range of different experiences. Of course, you can capture other content, streamed and things at the same time. But I think it's that sheer melting pot of people in very different roles, from very different industries, very different depths of experience. There'll be novice people there. There'll be people who've been, who have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years and still think it's basically the same thing. But it's this passion around people that, there's this, I guess, tuning fork of boom, here's what we're all here. We're all ultimately really excited about something to do with this space, right? So apart from the social thing, and I love events anyway, because the face-to-face piece allows you to, well, you and I met there, right? So
Indeed.
You can form lifelong friendships, and you can really get a lot out of that physical interaction, typically not even just from the sessions. Personally, I spend a lot of my time not even in sessions, just networking and bumping into people and finding out, well, why you're here, what's up to it. So it's a very collegial, friendly group of people. And if you're looking to greatly expand your capabilities in this world of communication and content marketing, then I can think of no better place to do it.
Indeed.
And it is indeed a fantastic city.
Yeah. And you come back with a bag full of ideas, and just getting out from behind the desk and going somewhere else, and just, as I say, diving into this experience that the team at the Content Marketing Institute have put together. It is just one of the great opportunities. So please do yourself a favour and get organised and get over there. Make the case to your boss, and it doesn't cost that much, really, in the greater scheme of things. It is a fair way from Australia.
There is that.
It's a big flight, but anyway, that's quite lots of movies, and you can do all sorts of things. You feel like you're on a bit of a holiday until you get there, and then you still feel like you're a holiday when you get there. But you're in like a theme park of of content, And as Todd says, there's so many wonderful people there who you can just bump into, and everyone has a great time. So please get yourselves organised and get over there. So Todd, thank you very much for coming.
Dave, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Love it. And I know to the audience, this is the thing, it's about insight, it's about understanding, and there's so much that we can take out of what just this conversation we've got today. Those 2 or 3 things that we can take away and think about it. Just one of them early, how many times have people told us on this podcast, get the CEO buy-in, get that happening, because it's so fundamentally important. And Todd's experience of, the basics are the basics are the basics. And let's take this gift of technology that helps us to, to be perhaps more effective and more efficient, but let's not forget who we are, and let's not forget the basics. So anyway, audience, thank you so much for coming back once again. I will be back at the same time next week, but for the moment, it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.